The most liberating moment of my life wasn't my wedding day or a career victory. It was the second I told my husband to man up and slammed the door on our marriage. Have you ever felt like you were in a silent war with your partner's family, and your partner was fighting for the other side? Because that final plea for a hug wasn't about comfort. It was a weapon in a long campaign of manipulation, and it was the one that would finally, unexpectedly, set me free. It's a peculiar, chilling science, understanding the exact moment a beautiful thing is compromised. You can own a flawless crystal vase for years, admiring how it catches the light, and then one day, an imperceptible tremor creates a crack so fine you can convince yourself it isn't there. You learn to angle it on the shelf just so, to keep it out of direct sunlight. You live in a state of willful ignorance, pretending the integrity is intact. But the flaw exists, a silent testament to a moment of impact. And with every subsequent vibration, no matter how small, that initial fracture spiders outward, branching into a delicate, fatal web, until the day you brush against it, and the entire structure disintegrates into 1,000 sharp-edged memories. My marriage to Mark was my flawless crystal vase. I had cherished it, protected it, believed in its strength, and the first crack, the one that doomed it from the start, appeared on a sun-drenched Tuesday afternoon in a house that smelled of promise, during what was supposed to be the overture to the happiest chapter of our lives. We were standing in the vast, empty living room of our first home. We'd bought a charming, slightly neglected bungalow in Oak Park, a Chicago suburb known for its historic homes and tree-lined streets. The air was a heady mix of fresh semi-gloss paint and the raw, clean scent of newly sanded oak floors. I had my arms wrapped tightly around Mark's waist, my cheek pressed against the soft cotton of his shirt. I could feel the steady, reassuring rhythm of his heart beneath my ear, a rhythm I had come to associate with safety and home. We had bled for this place. I had spent countless nights bathed in the blue glow of my monitor, taking on every freelance graphic design project that came my way, fueled by coffee and ambition. He had endured brutal tax seasons at his accounting firm, coming home long after I'd fallen asleep. This house, with its sun-filled rooms and sprawling backyard, was meant to be the physical manifestation of our partnership. Or so I had tragically believed. The sharp, two-tone chime of the doorbell cut through our quiet moment. Standing on our freshly painted porch, framed by the afternoon sun, was Mark's mother, Karen, a woman who moved with the unnerving poise of a queen visiting a slightly disappointing colony. Beside her, a step behind and to the left, as always, was his younger sister, Emily, her features a paler, less defined echo of her mother's. I had met Karen, of course, on several carefully curated occasions. These were not relaxed get-togethers. They were performances. Each dinner was a meticulously choreographed ballet of forced pleasantries, during which I felt the constant, unnerving weight of her judgment. It was as if she were grading me against a rubric that was written in invisible ink. My mom's just protective, Mark would always say, a placating mantra he repeated so often I think he actually believed it. She just needs to get to know the real you, Sarah. Once she does, she'll absolutely love you. His optimism was a drug I desperately wanted to be addicted to. So, I stretched my lips into the brightest, most welcoming smile I could muster and swung the door open wide. Karen's gaze, a pair of laser-sharp blue eyes, bypassed me entirely. It swept across the empty rooms, from the baseboards to the ceiling, her lips pressing themselves into a thin, bloodless line. Where I saw a blank canvas of possibility, she saw a litany of flaws. "It's cozy," she finally pronounced, letting the word hang in the air between us, weighted with unspoken meaning. Cozy meant small. Cozy meant inadequate. Emily, ever her mother's faithful acolyte, nodded sagely. It's definitely a lot smaller than your old high-rise apartment, isn't it, Mark? You had that amazing view of the lake. Mark just produced a short, nervous laugh and gave my shoulder a squeeze that felt more like a warning than a comfort. It's a starter home, Mom. It's perfect for us. Think of the yard. I steered them toward the kitchen, the one room that had already been fully renovated in my mind. I could see it all. A deep apron front sink, warm butcher block countertops, a pot rack hanging with gleaming copper pans. It would be the heart of our home, the place where I would bake birthday cakes and cook sprawling Thanksgiving dinners for a family I was so eager to officially join. I'm thinking of painting the cabinets a warm sage green, I said, unable to keep the bubble of excitement from my voice. And maybe some open shelving here. Karen glided over to the old, dated laminate countertop and ran a perfectly manicured finger along its surface, not as a caress, but as an inspection. Green? She scoffed, the sound barely audible but sharp as a needle. That's a very specific choice. A bit trendy, don't you think? Trends fade so quickly. And you know, Mark has always detested the color green. Ever since that dreadful uniform at St. Jude's, it reminds him of polyester and boring school assemblies. My breath caught in my throat. Every muscle in my body went rigid. I turned my head slowly to look at Mark, my eyes pleading with him. Please, I thought. Just say it's not true. Just say you love my ideas. Just be my partner. But he just offered a weak, apologetic shrug, avoiding my gaze. I mean, it's not my favorite color, I guess, but if Sarah likes it, it's fine. If Sarah likes it, he said it as if my preference was a strange, foreign whim that had to be tolerated rather than a shared decision. He didn't defend me. He didn't defend us. He defaulted to her memory, her narrative, making my vision, our vision, seem foolish and ill-considered. That was it. That was the first, undeniable crack in the crystal. A tiny, almost invisible hairline fracture, but one that I felt deep in my bones. It was the moment I understood, with sickening clarity, that I was not just building a home with Mark. I was in a silent, undeclared war with his mother, and my supposed ally was already negotiating terms of surrender. The weeks that followed were an escalation of that silent war, a masterclass in Karen's unique brand of psychological warfare. The sage green cabinets became a recurring point of contention. She would casually leave paint swatches on the counter when she visited, all in shades of beige, grayish, and taupe. I just saw these at the hardware store and thought of you, she'd say, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. These are classic colors. They speak of elegance, much better for resale value, you know. Mark, desperate to avoid any friction, would take the swatches and hold them up against the wall. See, Sarah? This one isn't so bad. It's called Windswept Dune. It's kind of warm. Let's just paint a little sample square. For Mom. It's just to make her happy. Is it really worth the fight? The fight, I wanted to scream, was for my own voice in my own home. But I relented. The sample square of Windswept Dune went up, and it was the color of sadness, of compromise. I tried to tell myself this was a normal phase, the uncomfortable jostling for position in a new family dynamic. I was the newcomer, the one disrupting her lifelong bond with her son. Of course, she felt threatened. My strategy, I decided, was to be unimpeachably kind, to be so thoughtful, so generous, that she would have no choice but to lay down her arms. For her and her husband's 35th wedding anniversary, I embarked on a project of love. I spent a week digging through Mark's old family photos, scanning hundreds of them. I digitally cleaned and color-corrected each one, then designed a stunning, professionally printed photo album, a narrative of their lives together. The pièce de résistance was a faded, torn photo of Karen's late father, a man she adored. I found a local expert in photo restoration, paid a small fortune to have it brought back to life, and made it the final, full-page image in the album. I presented it to them during a tense anniversary dinner, my heart thumping with a desperate, foolish hope. Karen opened the heavy, linen-bound book. Her face remained a placid, unreadable mask. She flipped through the pages with a slow, deliberate coolness, Emily peering over her shoulder with a critical squint. When she reached the final page, the restored portrait of her father, she paused. She tilted her head. "Oh," she said. "You cropped it. You cut off the edge of his prize-winning rose bush. He loved that bush more than anything." She closed the album with a soft thud and placed it on the far edge of the coffee table, as if it were contaminated. "That was a very thoughtful gesture, dear." The praise was so faint, so barbed, that it sliced deeper than any overt insult could. The drive home was thick with a silence that felt like an accusation. I stared out the window, watching the city lights blur into streaks of neon pain. Mark finally cleared his throat. "You know," he began, his voice cautious, "you probably shouldn't have edited that photo of Grandpa. Mom is very, very particular about those things. You just don't know her yet." My head whipped around to face him, my seatbelt digging into my shoulder. "I spent over 60 hours on that gift, Mark. I poured my heart into it. I restored a priceless memory for your mother." He sighed, a long, weary sound of exasperation that told me I was the problem. "I know, Sarah, I know. I get it. But you just have to learn how to handle her. It's an art. It's not that hard. You just have to choose your battles." Not that hard. It was becoming the most exhausting, soul-crushing job I had ever had. I was losing my own reflection. My tastes, my joys, my very opinions were being relentlessly sanded down in an effort to please a woman who was determined to remain unpleased. The house I had once dreamed of now felt like an occupied territory. The beige paint, a color I viscerally hated, went up on the kitchen walls. An ornate, monstrously uncomfortable velvet sofa that Karen had found at an estate sale for a complete steal now dominated our living room, because Mark couldn't bear the thought of hurting his mother's feelings by refusing her generous gift. Every corner of my home, every aspect of my life, was being systematically infiltrated by her influence. And the man who had vowed to be my partner, my protector, was holding the door open for the invading army. The breaking point began to loom during the planning of our wedding. We had both been in complete agreement. A simple, elegant ceremony at the Chicago Botanic Garden, followed by a candlelit dinner at our favorite Italian restaurant in the city. It was to be intimate, personal, and profoundly us. But Karen viewed our wedding not as a celebration of our love, but as a production of which she was the executive producer. At a brunch she'd insisted on hosting, she unveiled her own vision. A grand, cavernous Catholic church, a guest list bloated with over 200 of her friends and distant relatives I had never heard of. "A wedding is not just for the two of you," she announced, addressing the entire table but looking directly at Mark. "It's a statement to the community. It's for the family. Mark is my only son. I have been dreaming of this day his entire life." When I tried to gently, respectfully articulate our own dreams for the day, she deployed her most potent weapon: theatrical, wounded martyrdom. "Oh, of course," she said, placing a hand on her chest. "Forgive me. I'm just a silly, old-fashioned mother. Don't mind me. I'll just sit in the back row and be quiet. It's your day, after all." The performance was flawless. It was textbook emotional manipulation, and Mark, her perfectly conditioned audience, gave it a standing ovation every time. He would pull me aside later, his face etched with a pained sincerity. "Can't we just invite a few of her friends, Sarah? It would mean the world to her. Is it really that big of a deal?" Yes, it was a big deal. It was the ceremonial beginning of our life. It was supposed to be the one day that was unapologetically, exclusively ours. But I was losing that battle too. I was being worn down, eroded by 1,000 tiny concessions. I started to feel like I was losing my mind. The gaslighting was constant and insidious. Was I the one being unreasonable? Was my desire for a small wedding selfish? Was I, as Karen often hinted, not a family person? Karen and Emily had perfected a form of communication that was a masterwork of plausible deniability. They would praise my work with a little twist that made it sound insignificant. "It's just so wonderful that you have a creative hobby that can also help pay some of the bills." My career, my passion, was reduced to a little craft project. When I landed my biggest client to date, a national retail brand that was a huge name in the industry, and told them the news, my voice trembling with pride, Karen's immediate response was, "Well, I do hope you'll still have time to be a proper wife to my son. A man like Mark needs a lot of support at home." My spirit began to shrink. At family gatherings, I retreated into a shell of silence, knowing that any word I uttered could be repurposed as a weapon against me later. My silence, predictably, was then diagnosed as snobbery. I was in the hallway one Sunday when I overheard Emily talking to Mark in the kitchen. Her voice was a conspiratorial whisper. "Sarah doesn't even try to connect with us. She just sits there with that look on her face, like she's too good for our family." I waited for Mark to defend me, to explain the impossible situation they put me in. The silence that followed was his answer. A few minutes later, he came to find me. "Could you maybe try to engage a little more with Emily? She feels like you don't like her." I wanted to scream until my lungs burned. I was a person drowning, and he was standing on the shore, calmly suggesting I try a different swimming stroke. The final, deliberate conspiracy to break me began about a month before the day I finally slammed the door. I was neck-deep in the project for the national retail client. It was the kind of portfolio-defining work that could elevate my career to an entirely new level. It required 16-hour days, intense focus, and every ounce of my creative energy. I was stressed, yes, but it was a generative, thrilling stress. It was the feeling of building something magnificent. But in our house, my ambition was treated not as a virtue, but as a form of marital betrayal. Mark, now fully channeling his mother's sentiments, began to complain constantly that I was never available, that I was always glued to that computer screen. He started to manufacture needs, an endless stream of minor crises that required my immediate attention. Suddenly, he couldn't decide on a new tie for a meeting without my input. He needed me to listen to him recount a 20-minute blow-by-blow story about a minor disagreement with a coworker, right as I was trying to solve a complex design problem. It was a constant, low-level sabotage of my focus and my time. He was testing my devotion, forcing me to choose between his trivial, immediate wants and my own significant long-term goals. I knew, with the cold certainty of a prisoner who has memorized the guard's footsteps, what was happening. I was being systematically punished for having a life that did not revolve entirely around his comfort, his schedule, and his family's suffocating approval. This brings me to that fateful Tuesday morning. It was the day of my final make-or-break presentation to the client's executive board. Everything was on the line. I had been awake since 4 a.m., the city still dark and quiet outside my window. I had gone over my pitch until the words were etched into my memory, checked every slide, every font, every color code. My entire professional future felt like it was balanced on the knife's edge of this one meeting. I felt a humming, electric current of nervous energy coursing through me. This was my day, my moment. I was dressed in a sharp, tailored suit that made me feel powerful, my leather portfolio case in my hand, my mind 100% locked on the victory I was about to claim. As I was heading for the front door, my keys in my hand, Mark emerged from the bedroom. He was wearing rumpled pajamas and a forlorn expression. "You're leaving already?" he asked, his voice thick with a calculated pout. "Mark, you know I have the presentation at 9. We've talked about this all week," I said, trying to keep my tone even, trying not to betray the frantic urgency I felt. "I know, but," he said, shuffling his feet on the hardwood floor like a child being left behind. "I had a really awful night's sleep. I think I'm coming down with something. My head is pounding." I stopped, my hand hovering over the doorknob, and turned to really look at him. There was no flush of fever on his cheeks. His eyes weren't glassy. He didn't look sick. He looked like a man who had spent his entire life as the sun in his own solar system and was panicking because one of his planets was daring to spin out of orbit. "I'm sorry you didn't sleep well," I said, my voice clipped. "Maybe you can take some Tylenol and lie down this morning. I will call you the absolute second I'm out of the meeting." I had to go. My Uber was 2 minutes away, but he moved, physically placing himself between me and the door, blocking my exit. His expression was a bizarre, unsettling mixture of pathetic vulnerability and stubborn demand. Can I get a hug before you go?" he asked, his voice a soft, childish whisper. And in that instant, the crack didn't just splinter. The entire crystal vase, the whole beautiful, fragile illusion of our life together, exploded into a million razor-sharp shards. The request was a lie. It was a weapon disguised as a plea. It was a final, desperate power play designed to pull my focus away from my imminent triumph and back onto his manufactured, trivial neediness. It was the embodiment of every passive-aggressive comment from Karen, every dismissive shrug from him, every beige-painted wall and compromised dream, all rolled into one pathetic, manipulative request for a hug. He didn't see a partner on the verge of a massive achievement. He saw a possession, a resource that was slipping from his grasp. All the patience I had so carefully cultivated, all the times I had swallowed my anger and forced a polite smile, all the silent screams I had choked down in the car on the way home from his parents' house, it all detonated. A cold, hard, clarifying anger rose in me, an anger I hadn't even realized I was capable of holding. I stared at him. The man I loved, the man I had rearranged my entire world for, was standing in front of me, employing the emotional tactics of a toddler to deliberately sabotage the most important day of my professional life. "A hug?" I snapped, my voice cracking through the quiet hallway like a whip. "Are you being serious right now? You are not a child, Mark." I didn't wait for an answer. I pushed past him, my shoulder connecting firmly with his, knocking him off balance. I grabbed my bag from the floor and yanked the front door open with so much force it banged against the wall. I turned back one last time to look at his shocked, slack-jawed face, and I uttered the two words that had been boiling in the cauldron of my soul for months. "Man up!" And then I slammed the door. The sound was a deafening boom, a definitive, echoing punctuation mark on the end of a long, miserable sentence. It was a brutal, ugly, ungracious moment. And it was, without a single doubt, the most liberating and honest thing I had ever done. In the back of the Uber, speeding towards downtown, I felt no guilt. I felt no remorse. I felt a breathtaking, exhilarating lightness. The crushing weight of trying to please him, of trying to appease his mother, of trying to be a smaller, quieter version of myself, had been lifted. For the first time in over a year, I was solely, completely responsible for my own thoughts and my own success. And my presentation? I didn't just nail it, I owned it. I was a force. I was confident, articulate, and passionate. My vision was clear, my voice was strong. I walked out of that gleaming corporate tower with the contract secured, a new chapter of my career launched, and an unshakable new sense of my own power. The intoxicating high of that victory lasted until the moment I put my key in the lock of my own front door. As soon as I stepped inside, I knew. The atmosphere in the house was heavy, thick with a silent, simmering hostility. And there they were, assembled in the living room on the hideous velvet couch his mother had chosen. The tribunal: Karen, Emily, and Mark. It was an ambush. Mark's eyes were puffy and red-rimmed, as if he'd spent the afternoon crying. Karen's face was a mask of glacial fury, and Emily was looking at me with a smirk of pure, undisguised schadenfreude. "There she is," Karen began, her voice low and dripping with theatrical venom. "The career woman, so very busy, so very important, that she can't spare a single moment for her sick husband who was asking for a simple comfort." I didn't flinch. I calmly placed my portfolio case on the floor and faced them. "He wasn't sick, Karen. He was demanding attention, using the same manipulative tactics you taught him his entire life." Her eyes flew open in theatrical shock. No one in her life dared to speak to her this way. "How dare you?" she gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "After everything I have done for you, I welcomed you into my family." "You did not welcome me," I interrupted, my voice as cold and clear as ice. "You have done nothing but try to dismantle my life since the day I met you. You undermined my choices, you criticized my home, you belittled my career, and you systematically attacked my character. You did not want a daughter-in-law, you wanted a doormat. You are not a mother, you are a saboteur." I then turned my full attention to Mark. He flinched, refusing to meet my eyes, staring intently at his own hands as if they held the secrets to the universe. "And you," I said, my voice softening not with affection, but with a profound and bottomless pity. "You let her. You stood by and watched her poison our marriage because you are, and always have been, too much of a coward to stand up to her. You are too weak to be a husband. Every single time I needed a partner, you gave me your mother's opinion instead. Every time I needed a teammate, you chose to be her little boy." "I told Mark this would happen," Emily chimed in, unable to resist her moment. "I said from the very beginning that you were cold and selfish." I barely gave her a glance. "This was never about you, Emily. You were just a supporting character in your mother's drama. This has always been about her pathological inability to let her son go and his pathetic inability to grow up." Finally, Mark looked up, his face a blotchy mess of confusion and righteous anger. "I just asked for a hug, Sarah, a simple hug, and you told me to man up, and you slammed the door in my face. My own wife." "Yes," I said, and a strange, serene peace settled over me like a blanket. "I did, because in that moment, I finally understood the truth with perfect clarity. It was never, ever about the hug. Just like it was never about the green paint, or the wedding guest list, or the restored photograph. Those were all just battles in a long war for control. A war to make sure that I always knew my place. And my place, in your family's eyes, was always supposed to be a distant second to you, and a third-place afterthought to her. I walked over to the hideous coffee table, picked up the beautiful, rejected photo album I had poured my heart into, and tucked it under my arm. I am done. I am done auditioning for a role in a family that was determined from the start to never cast me. I walked into our bedroom, the beige walls closing in on me, and pulled my largest suitcase from the top of the closet. They sat in the other room, shrouded in a stunned, disbelieving silence as I began to methodically pack. I packed my clothes, my books, my design awards. I packed up the remnants of the life I had tried so desperately to build. Mark appeared in the doorway, a ghost in his own home, looking utterly helpless. "What are you doing?" he whispered. You can't just leave." "Watch me," I said, not even pausing in my task. "You have a choice to make, Mark. You've always had a choice. You can be a husband, or you can be her son. But you have proven to me, today and every day for the past year, that you don't have the strength to be both, and I am no longer willing to set myself on fire just to keep the two of you warm." I zipped the suitcase shut with a final, satisfying sound. I walked past him, my head held high, back into the living room. Karen stood up, her face pale with rage. "You will regret this for the rest of your life," she hissed. "You are throwing away a good, loving man." I stopped and turned to face her one last time, and I laughed. A real, deep, genuine laugh that came from a place of pure, unadulterated freedom. "No, Karen," I said, smiling. "I'm not throwing him away. I'm giving him back to you. It's clear you need him much more than I do." That was 6 months ago. I never set foot in that beige house again. I stayed with a wonderful friend for a few weeks before finding my own place, a stunning, sun-drenched loft downtown with massive industrial windows and soaring ceilings. The very first thing I did, before I even fully unpacked, was go to the hardware store and buy 2 gallons of the most beautiful, most vibrant, most unapologetic sage green paint I could find. My career hasn't just taken off since that presentation. It has soared. The liberation from that constant, draining emotional warfare has unleashed a torrent of creativity in me I didn't know I possessed. I am respected in my field. I am financially independent. I am happy, a deep, quiet, solid happiness I have built for myself. Mark has tried to reach out, of course. The first few weeks, the texts were angry and accusatory. Then they became sad and pleading. He told me he was going to therapy. He said he finally understood everything. But I know it's just another performance. A mutual friend I met for coffee last week told me, with a pitying look, that he's miserable. He and his mother, without me as their common enemy, their buffer, have turned their toxic dynamic on each other. He got exactly what he always chose, a life sentence with his warden. I sometimes find myself wondering, what if I had just given him that hug? What if I had swallowed my pride one more time, canceled my meeting, and tended to his fake illness? Would we still be together? Would I still be living in that beige house, slowly watching my own vibrant colors fade to match the walls? The thought sends a cold shiver down my spine. Slamming that door was not the end of my marriage. It was the explosive, glorious, messy beginning of my own life. What would you have done in my shoes? Would you have stayed, continuing to fight for a man who so clearly refused to ever fight for you? Or would you have slammed the door too?